I didn't follow in with what I was working on, which would be the last 5 of the commandments. Because there's been such interesting stuff happening and so many different news pieces and stuff, I thought I would take just one little break from it for a second to have some fun commentary on some items that were going on and what God would expect us to focus on, hopefully, as we go through this. But if there's one thing you should notice when you're looking at a lot of the news stuff, and that is deceit. There's so much dishonesty that's been going out there and trying to be pretended is a real thing. Just outright lies. Some of the betterest examples have been from PolitiFact. Anybody ever follow PolitiFact? They're the ones who are supposed to be the fact checkers to make sure that the politicians are saying the truth. But they are really biased. And their biasness has been really demonstrated huge now, so that most people laugh at them because they're so biased. They're not fact checkers at all. So people have been fact checking PolitiFact on a regular basis, and it's been kind of funny, the response. But it's nasty how things have actually changed. When it comes to deceit, a couple of passages in Mark 13:22, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and show wonders and signs to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Now, sometimes people can get from that it's not possible for the elect to be deceived, but the elect are warned so many times throughout the Bible not to be deceived, it would tend to be possible. And they actually deal with things where people have been deceived and corrected many times in the Bible. It is possible for people to be deceived. In Romans 16:18 says, for those who are such do not serve our Lord Jesus Christ, but their own belly, and by smooth words and flattering speech deceive the hearts of the simple. So lots of times it's people who are always got that nice component to them that are also trying to be deceptive while they have that style going. And we can think of that in a very simple thing as oftentimes in guys trying to date girls, trying to make an impression at first, they say all kinds of flattering speech, but doesn't necessarily have any depth to that speech in any way, shape, or form. It's not Ben, though. But here's an example of deceit that people can recognize, but it's very insidious in nature, and that is Santa Claus. Now, sometimes people think, no big deal, everybody knows that's not true, so, what's the point? But Santa Claus is a very insidious, which the word means proceeding in a gradual, subtle way, but with harmful effects in its presentation. And how that is, and I kind of wanted little girls here for this little part, because I think that it would have been kind of special for that. But with Santa Claus, people usually know the song, here comes Santa Claus, here comes... No, that's not it. You better watch out, you better not shout, you better not pout, I'm telling you why. No, you better not cry, I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming to town. He knows if you've been sleeping, he knows if you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. So, right on, okay. So people know that kind of expression, and you get the thing that Santa Claus is the one that's going to come and judge you on whether or not you've been good or bad, and he brings his reward with him. And it's supposed to be a lump of coal once upon a time if you were bad, and you're present if you're good. But Christmas, I've talked on, is actually on the blog spot another time. Christmas is a holiday to replace the Feast of Tabernacles. It's almost a lot of the same type of concepts, except Christ coming to this earth, the Feast of Tabernacles, is actually in judgment. It's a future time period in judgment. Whereas Christ is coming to be king is oftentimes mentioned. I don't mind those mentions at this time of year even, because that's true. But the rest of the stuff wrapped around it is actually pushed over, and some incredibly terrible things built into it. Santa Claus in this holidays replaces the returning Christ. So instead of Christ coming in judgment, and his reward will be with him, whether good or bad, it's replaced with Santa Claus. And Santa Claus comes in a big red suit, eh? Christ is going to come in garments stained in red. And he's going to come to Jordan. When he comes, not through a chimney. But Jordan feels like a fire sometimes, I think. But that's the description that you actually get in the other prophets where it's taken from in Revelation, where he's actually coming and where he comes about dressed in red, coming to Israel to save the Israel nation, which is much different than the way Muslims describe that. But he's coming, and he's coming in red, and he's coming in judgment. Now, kids hear about Santa Claus, and when they get older, what do they realize about Santa? He's not real. He's just a story Mom and Dad tell you so that you'll be good. So Mom and Dad deceived you and lied to you all these years so you'll be good, but it's not a real story. You don't have to worry about it. But if Santa Claus is a type of Christ, isn't it kind of fascinating that tens of millions of Christians have gotten to the concept where Christ is not really coming back, he's just a story? Almost the same way that people look at Santa Claus down the road. And it's very much a consistent type viewpoint that people end up getting to it. And that's why I say that's a very insidious nature about that aspect. Is the real holidays, when you're going through that, is supposed to recognize within you, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that Christ is returning in judgment. Is returning in judgment. Here's some other examples of deceit. A fascinating one, because I can relate to this because of so many things that I've heard and things that I've been involved with at work. But a poll in the U.S. colleges, 15% of freshman women are raped the first year of college. That's a pretty significant number. Most colleges discourage the reporting to police and say reporting to college security is suffice. And that would be true in Canada too. A lot of them do that. Federal government in the state spends tens of millions of dollars on how to reduce sexual assaults and yet never mentions excessive drinking as a leading factor. And that's true in Canada. Why? Because of political correctness. If you mention alcohol with rape, women can have it that they're somewhat responsible. So you should never mention it. Because it's not their fault somebody raped them. Does that make sense? That's the political correct viewpoint, why you should never mention alcohol with it. You're looking a little bit quizzical back there. Okay, so if you're going to the mall and you decide you're going to go shopping in Walmart and you're going to leave your car and your vehicle running and the door's unlocked and you go into Walmart and your car is not there afterwards, do you think it was a little bit ridiculous that you left them the opportunity? What do you think? It's not your fault somebody stole your car, but is it ridiculous that you left it like that? So would you tell your children not to leave their car running like that? Well, you don't want them to have their car stolen, right? Especially if you don't have insurance, because if you got boys, you probably can't afford comprehensive insurance when they're really young. He can now. He's a good driver now. But the fact is, 92% of the rapes involved in excessive alcohol. That's self-reported by the people involved. This is a polling where they self-reported it. Now, I say here, when you dress like a harlot and you have an excessive amount of alcohol so that you no longer can control the fact that you're in an appropriate situation, are you giving people the opportunity to take advantage of you? It doesn't clear them in any way, shape, or form from doing what was inappropriate. But why did you give them the opportunity? So if you really cared, wouldn't you make that part of your presentation? Never put yourself in an opportunity where you're automatically going to be beat up. Because if people didn't get involved in excessive alcohol, I'm betting that top number drops down to less than 5%. They wouldn't put themselves in the wrong situation. And then how many of those excessive alcohols were also the other person? So neither of them knew what the heck they were doing. They just regretted it afterwards. So sometimes it was reported as rape when both parties were a mess. They just felt excessively regretful afterwards. And that's happened many different times. But political correctness, that you're deceiving people into saying there's nothing you can do to stop that, it's just the other person. Instead of, you don't have to encourage that behavior to happen ever. Is there any verse in the Bible that would encourage you to not give somebody else the opportunity to sin? That's a good question, don't you think? Because I say these are the principles with regards to dress. Nowhere in the Bible that says you must dress with a dress that goes down to your knee. Doesn't have a direct head or stuff like that. But there is principle involved that you shouldn't encourage someone else to sin in any way, shape, or form. So you wouldn't be encouraging that in any way, shape, or form. You would try to encourage them to behave properly. So when we do that, and we probably have all done that in various different ways, that's wrong. So we want to use your heads as much as possible. So that's the idea of never getting too much alcohol. And in my case, I don't want to have too much alcohol because I realize it's too easy to be stupid. It really is. It's too easy to be stupid. And you don't want to have to deal with the effects afterwards. And they want to pretend like there's no problems with all that excessive alcohol, drugs, but there is. It's deceit. Man-made climate. There's a couple of examples just recently that's just been fascinating to me. Trump says Obama's speech where climate change was the greatest threat to the world was the stupidest thing he ever heard. I laughed my head off when he responded. It was just a short little tweet too, I like that. Obama responded that Trump should listen to some of the things he says, and then went on to say 99.5% of scientists believe in catastrophic climate change. 99.5%. The same media that spent a week railing against Trump for exaggeration by saying thousands of Muslims in America celebrated the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which is, by the way, 100% provable. And when they were making fun of that, people went back and fact-checked, and they pulled out the New York Times, which is incredibly liberal, which is one of the first ones to crucify him for making that comment. They pulled out CNBC reports and videos from it. There was actually a party of Muslims on rooftops that knew that the attacks were going to take place, and they were having a party to celebrate while the towers were being hit and went down. But for any of us that lived through it, and you probably remember some of the reports back then anyways. That is what the media had reported, that there was teams of Muslims that actually supported it in various locations. But they didn't question Obama's ridiculous exaggeration of 99.5% of scientists believe in catastrophic climate change. That is obvious deceit. And it was an outright lie, and it's been an outright lie for a long time. Even when the UN report put it out there, and they put out 99.7% of scientists believe in possibility of possible man-made effect of anthropologic, the word for it, but man might have had some effect to cause climate change. Very few scientists have said they believe man will create catastrophic climate change. That's almost all political. It's almost all political. Tens of thousands and tens of thousands and tens of thousands of scientists have said that that's not the case. That's political response. Deceit of climate change. If you give trillions to the world government, they can change the weather. Who believes that? But that's the actual principle of it. And that's what I put as man God. Can man control the outcome? Through the lies and deceit of all scientists in agreement, the catastrophic nature of the supposed outcome, the World Council of Churches is now seeking to enforce this on its members as it is its rights agenda. And this is a thing that happens in the background that a lot of times people don't understand what's actually taking place a lot of times with regards to religion. Churches are starting to try to force the government's agenda in different ways. We'll go to rights. Just going to step off that and come back to global warming in a second. But rights. Myrna's mom. It's a really nice church. You want to remain part of the Mennonite church group that they're part of, you have to accept homosexuality or you can't be part of our group no more. This is a conservative Mennonite group. That's what they had to vote on to actually not be a part of the other group anymore and be their own independent church because they weren't going to accept it. The deceit. It's normal for some people to be homosexual because they were born that way and God loves them being homosexual. Now Carson's response. He was crucified for saying that almost all men heading to prison for the first time are heterosexual. Yet a significant number come out of prison homosexual, demonstrating environmental factors, and they're not born that way. And we're talking probably about 2,500% of the ones that come out homosexual would be adamant that they weren't homosexual going into prison. Huge numbers, different, okay? And for most people, it's easy to see this and understand that. There's no factual argument against this when they started hammering him. They just blasted him as a homophobe. And when you get to the point of all your argument is words, is hateful words, you have no argument. A lot of times people just don't get that when people are making arguments. If somebody's only argument is to mock you, they have no argument. They should be able to argue with facts. Occasionally somebody will try to make an argument that, you know, that young teen boy, he grows up, he's always appeared to be gay as he grows up. And I would say in many of those cases it's probably the result of pedophilia, which has been huge. So he's grown up abused, and he acts that way because that was normal to him from the time he was little when he was abused. And that happens a lot more than people want to admit happens. Just as in the paper today said that there's thousands of people that have been put into the sex trade, forced into it in Ontario. People don't want to admit that it happens, but it's been happening huge. These rights being forced, this concept of deceit being forced into people that God thinks that they were normal that way, so while they act that way, you must love them and accept them acting that way. That's wrong. Now, if you don't agree with homosexuality, immediately they want to call you what? A homophobe. Okay? Now, for those of you who don't know, my sister's homosexual. And obviously, by the letter my other sister sent, she got married this last year. And I knew that from some other comments, but she didn't invite me to that marriage because she knew that I would not have went. Because I will not pretend that that's an acceptable thing before God. I think it makes a mockery of marriage. But my sister, on the other hand, I guarantee you, thinks that I love her. I think she's incredibly deceived. From different conversations I've had with her on the subject once upon a time, I think she's very much deceived on it. And I think just like people of Sodom and Gomorrah, she might be less accountable for some things along the way than other people who know a lot more. But saying I'm against it does not mean I'm going to beat up people who don't know any better. There's for sure one of the dispatchers at work is. And I have a great relationship with that person. And they would like to say that you have to be that way. You don't have to be that way. But there is something that's really fascinating is how many people like to see homosexuals kissing? None of you? Do you know what? It's a huge percentage of the population that doesn't want to see it. That's why you don't see it as that often, despite the fact that they'd like to do it. But it would really turn off so many people. They try not to do it that much in public because people are right against it. Because people think that it is gross. Gross. Which could lead you to a funny joke, but I'm not going to tell that joke because somebody might get offended. But back to climate change. What happens to the journalists or scientists who speak against climate change? And the BBC had a fantastic example this week. The guy did just a fun little report. He had a couple of people that were not in favor of it. He didn't express his opinion one way or the other, but they had all kinds of different viewpoints presented during this little passage. But because he let these two other people present it, they ended up getting rid of him as one of their journalists. Just a fair, unbiased presentation that from somebody who's really a liberal journalist in the first place. But what happens to scientists lots of times is they lose their ability to continue in many of the different places. They get called flat earthers, deniers, and if they're denying real factual science instead of, they're just denying the lies and the deception. They lose their jobs, so eventually the idea is that the rest will either be intimidated into shutting up or supporting something they don't necessarily believe. And that's the attitude that starts going out. The biggest bully in this world are the liberal thought police, but they also control the bullying programs to support their bullying. And when you go into that concept there, here's Cruz's response. He had a fantastic response this past week to climate change because he got kind of set up. He says, do you deny climate change? And the idea was to try to harass him. But he's a pretty intelligent guy, and he's used to debating cases in front of the Supreme Court in the U.S., so he's really good at responding back at gotcha questions generally. He responded that science is not a matter of belief or computer models or expert opinion, but of objective data and facts. The fact is that satellite data show no rise in atmospheric temperature for nearly 20 years. It's not something you can really debate. It's fact from the satellite data. It's also fact from the land data that's not been altered by NOAA or NASA. That show no increase for 20 years. He also pointed out that in the 1970s, some of the very same scientists were predicting an ice age if we don't adopt the same remedy they are demanding now, drastic cuts in the use of fuels that power the world's economy. And since people hit with record winter cold are finding it hard to believe in global warming, the threat has morphed into climate change. It might be cold or it might be warm, it might be dry, it might be wet, it might be stormy, but it'll be unprecedented disaster if we don't cut the use of carbon-based fuels, and I would add a huge tax. 3 different apocalyptic scenarios, too cold, too hot, and changing, but all with the exact same remedy. Does that seem problematic? So that was his answer to it. You know, it's a pretty easy to understand answer because there's a lot of people that say, hey, it's not catastrophic, it's not a real problem. Climate change. No proof that man is a major contributor except for proven lies. Okay, and incontrovertible truth, there's so many things in there were just outright lies. No increase in world temperatures in 20 years. No increase in world seas. Antarctic ice as big as it ever was. The polar bears are doing just fine. Smog is pollution, but CO2 feeds the plants. And then a beautiful report recently says usually when we see these little spikes of warmer temperatures and colder temperatures, the CO2 increases right after the warmer spots and then decreases after we're colder for a little bit because it's being regulated by the plants that's transpiring in the heat. The answer to climate change, wealth distribution from supposed rich countries to poor countries. You gave 20% of your jobs to China and India via free trade, but they still expect you to give more. And China and India are perfect on this because they could care less if there's a world trade agreement. But people like Trudeau are holding their head based on whether or not they get some kind of something to show for it, and Obama, so they're willing to trade anything in order to get some kind of an agreement. That's not a very good negotiating position to be in. But India and China, what they're pretty much saying lately is, oh sure, we'll do reusable, what do they call it? Sustainable energy, as long as you guys pay for it. So if you want us to make 10% of our economy solar power, no problem. Pay for this 10% solar power, and we'll use it. That's the negotiation that's going on. And some things that are coming from it are very difficult. This isn't Christian, regardless what the World Council of Churches or the Pope say. It's actually government demagoguery. The very same thing they say about Trump is a perfect descriptor of the ones claiming it. And the idea is you got to set this up as some kind of ideal that the government is God that can answer everything. And Trump isn't the one that's saying that. He wants the people to have the opportunity to be able to sustain themselves and protect themselves individually. And I don't agree with everything he says either, but I'm happy that he says a lot of the stuff. A Christian response. Most Christians seem to see and get the fanatical approach government is making with climate change. The approach was the big inconvenient lie to get government on side, and then the quick denunciation of anyone who doesn't accept the lie, even when all the original proof is proven beyond a shadow of doubt to be a lie. And in this particular case, it was done too fast to be shown to be a lie when they exposed all the emails from East Anglia by the hackers group. And they really showed that it was all set up and was a lie, especially the hockey stick curve for carbon dioxide and heat temperature and that. But by exposing it from hackers, it exposed it to be a lie. Many Christians seem to get that. But I say they followed the same lie with respect to evolution. Evolution, all data that supposedly proved evolution in the 1800s was completely ended up being dog doo-doo. Wrong. However, science fields were forced to present findings with evolutionary perceptions in theoretical years or be out of a job. So today, most fundamentalist Christians seem to believe these presentations in a system based on a lie as if they are the truth. Meaning you get so used to hearing so many things from science that you think are based, it's the truth. So if you hear, these rocks were from 100,000 years ago because some such place, that you automatically believe it's true. But the whole basings for it in the first place was all based on a lie. But people get to accepting two opposing viewpoints based on the deceit that that was science. And it wasn't. The same type of Christian will eventually warm to the World Council of Churches' position on climate change. Even if we change, we'll have to stop pollution and help those who it hurts, even though everything it is premised on is a lie. Now, when you accept the deceits, you're actually supporting the Antichrist. He's the one that's the big deceiver, the big liar, and all these concepts eventually bring people away from Christ, and I want to talk about that. It's good not to pollute when you think about global warming. It's good not to pollute. It's good to be charitable. Biblical fundamentalists are proven leaders in these fields. It is not good to accept or promote the lie that's in the background. One more area before I talk about them all as a whole. Islam. Trump is an Islamophobe and a racist for calling for a pause in immigration. He isn't, but then again, that's the deceit, is the accusation against him. And I want to pull out the best example. There's been all kinds of great examples. The best example is the Hamas leader, or Hummus leader, because they hate being called hummus. The Hummus leader states, Islam is a religion of peace, and Trump is a racist. I got a kick out of it, because the same leader is responsible for 1,000 terrorist attacks. So how accurate is that statement? But that's the statement that keeps getting promoted, and if you don't promote that, well, there's something wrong with you. And if you don't promote that perspective, well, then your fear. They kept saying your fear. Obama kept saying we can't be fearful, and Hillary saying, it's because they're surviving on people's fear. And then the retired colonel from the U.S. responded on Fox. Did anybody hear that? I showed Katie that. You have to watch it. It's the funniest thing. It's only about 30 seconds or a minute left. but retired. He was asked, did you like Obama's presentation to the nation last Sunday night? And he goes, not at all. He doesn't get the people at all. The people are not scared. The people are ticked. He used different words than that. He was very demonstrative. The people are ticked. They're angry. They're upset. And they don't want any mamby-pamby female genitalia president to lecture them when he's not willing to do a darn thing about it. And I mean, this is a very old guy that's normally very reserved. He just blew up on that. He goes, people are not afraid. The afraid people are the people who keep saying that we need to, what's the word? My mind's going blank. Appease. We need to appease, because if we don't appease, they'll become stronger and stronger. Well, the people that have been appeasing for this last 8 years, 7 years in office, they're the ones that are making the terrorists stronger, not the people that wanted to deal with it. Now, he got a week suspension from being on Fox because his language was a little bit too colorful. But his response is more true. People aren't really incredibly afraid. People are angry and annoyed, and they're angry and annoyed that nobody's doing anything about it. Now, lots of times when this type of stuff happens, like the attack in San Bernardino, California, people say, why don't the moderate Muslims speak up? Ever hear that? Well, a group of imams in Texas spoke up. And one of them spoke up and actually said he supported the concept that Trump floated, that we need to pause immigration until we can stop these radical jihadists from coming in here, because we don't want that to be representative of Islam. He was fired. He was fired from being an imam. They didn't want him no more in the temple there. And there was actually probably about 100 moderate Muslims that did speak up that were fired in the past week or two. Why don't they speak up? That's why. You get this attitude against it. The truth is, and people don't want to have this truth said, Muhammad was a radical Islamic jihadist, responsible for the decapitation of thousands to coerce the rest to submit to Islam. His followers have continued this practice, which is why Islam has never been a religion of peace. Does that mean that there are peaceful people that are part of Islam? Yes, there are some people that are just naturally not going to do that. But the religion as a whole has promoted that since the very beginning, and it has gone on throughout the ages. That is not how Christianity is set up. And again, if you disagree and you say stuff that's not, I don't agree with Islam being religion of peace, it doesn't mean that I'm agreeing to hating Muslims. Most of them never knew anything different. They grew up like that. I teach a soccer boys team. Most of them are Muslim. I'm trying to help them out. Trying to give them a different perspective at times. But you don't accept the lie. Two religions use deceit as a regular practice. Only two. Islam and humanism and progressivism. And it's not just one party of Islam. It's not just one party of Islam. Muhammad condoned it. Partisan behavior. If you do not accept our approach to justify climate change, homosexuality, evolutionary science, Islam as peace, then they want to make it, you can't be a government leader, you can't work in a school, you can't be an employee, you can't be associated with us. They want to make it in churches nowadays, and many, many churches, that if you do not accept any of these things, you cannot be persecution. Now, when you look at these things, climate change, the idea that we're going to be able to control everything to do with the weather, and we're going to make it Eden on earth. Is that really considering Christ? Homosexuality, gay marriage. Is that really representative of Christ and the intent in what it actually represented in the first place between Christ and the church? Or is it a bastardization of it? Evolutionary science, is that recognizing Christ as creating? Islam is peace. Is that recognizing Christ as the Prince of Peace? There is going to be more and more fear, intimidation, and there's going to be more and more mocking of people if you do not agree with whatever comes out as politically correct. In Matthew 24:9-11 it says, "Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. And many false prophets will rise up and deceive many." And in Mark 12, I'm writing about the same time period, it says, "Now brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you'll be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end shall be saved." You know, the concept that they want to call Trump a Nazi. But what actually happened in Nazi Germany is that the people kept saying, if you do not support the Nazi perspective, they were going to persecute you and quite possibly kill you. It's always been a socialist perspective, that. And it was an extreme left. And the same happened in the various different communist countries. So we've seen this type of attitude in the past. But I say you're going to see this type of attitude happening more and more within churches. People start getting feared. They start saying, hey, we can't run contrary to what somebody else says. We want to be part of it. So instead of just doing what's right, you're going to be persecuted. More and more. It gets to be a sad and brutal ending when you're looking at that. So a lot of people say, hey, love the idea of the rapture where you can disappear and you cannot experience any of those difficulties. Only problem is it doesn't say you're going to disappear and not experience any of those difficulties. It says in Revelation 14:13, I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, "Right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, is the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them." And descriptive of that, when things are going to get really bad and God's going to act and God's going to keep showing the evil people the evil of the evil. That's what happens when God acts. He demonstrates the evil in the evil so many times, and he tricks them into thinking that they're going to get something and it doesn't go their way, and then they have to keep doubling down and stuff, but he keeps making a mockery of it at various different steps along the way. But going through the difficult times, he says if somebody dies, it's like they're just resting. They're asleep. When they wake, it's going to be a new day. They're blessed. We don't have to think about it that way, but to God, He knows He's going to call His name and you're going to come back. And when you come back, it's going to be a new day. So you get a chance to rest. For the rest, it says in Hebrews 12:3-4, "For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls." So consider Christ, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls when you see things where the zeitgeist of the world is opposed to the Bible, opposed to the Word of God, it's opposed to freedom. "You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin." It says, you know, what have you really dealt with? Nothing. And he was telling that to some people that had really dealt with a lot of stuff. Like I think Paul had dealt with a lot of stuff. But a lot of them hadn't been persecuted quite like Paul had. He goes, look, you guys haven't been beaten. You haven't been whipped. Consider what Jesus went through. And don't give up. Why did Jesus go through it though? So that's part of the thing. Jesus went through it for you and for I. In Hebrews 10:24-25, it says, "Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works." What happens when people start turning in people and hammering people who don't agree with the politically correct thing, whether it be from an organization, whether it be from the government? There's lack of love. So there's loss of love. What are we supposed to do together? Stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, but as the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. As you see difficulty, encourage people to look forward and to love, and not to behave negatively towards one another. Well, what happens on that day, the day approaching? I saw an angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold of the dragon, that serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. And he cast him into a bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal on him, so that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years were finished. End of the deception in the background. End of everything that was meant to be deceiving, meant to be the set of the lies, and a new world with Christ as leader. A part of seeing that picture, I'm sure part of seeing that picture for us was partly so that we could understand I think I slept well enough last night. Journey out of Egypt. What did they call that? The Exodus. The Exodus. In order to understand our Exodus, boy, tired. The words just aren't coming when I'm tired. But in order for us to understand our Exodus, we get to see the picture of Revelation. But we also get to see it so that we see God is in control of it. And when you're really depressed or think that things are bad because everything seems so negative around you with regards to the way things should be, and people are willing to lie and deceive, and a lot of the regular programming that we've had, you know, like I say Survivor, that's the thing I got disgusted with Survivor after a while, is because it was like teaching people, the idea is you just lie and do whatever you can in order to get ahead. And it's become like part of our general workforce now. Just lie to get whatever you want. You know, lie and deceive, and it's okay. It's just, that's good behavior. And it's wrong. And the idea, you're going to see a day when that stuff's done. So thinking of that day in Psalm 98, you can probably think of a couple of songs from this verse. In Psalm 98 says, "O sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm has gained him the victory. The Lord has made known his salvation. His righteousness he has revealed in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his mercy and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God." What's going to transpire? When he comes back, everybody's going to see it. "Shout joyfully to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth in song, rejoice and sing praises. Sing to the Lord with the harp, with the sound of a psalm, with trumpets and the sound of a horn. Shout joyfully before the Lord the King. Let the sea roar in all its fullness, the world and all those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the hills be joyful together before the Lord. For he is coming to judge the earth. With righteousness he shall judge the world, and the peoples with equity." Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to know that everything was going to be judged in equity and righteousness? No lies, no deceit, no acceptance of evil so that evil doesn't bother us, but honesty and truth. There's a song that gets sung at this time of year that I like it. And it was sung, and me and Zach got to sing along with it when we visited my mom the other day, and a choir came in to sing. And this was the song. And this song comes from Psalm 98. This song, when it was written, the songwriter had no thought whatsoever with respect to Christmas, but it got associated with Christmas. But the songwriter had no thought in that at all. He was writing Psalm 98, he read it, and this is the song he came up with that went with it. And that's Isaac Watts, who wrote a lot of the old hymns. "Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King." Let's all sing it. "Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ, while fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat the sounding joy, repeat the sounding joy, repeat, repeat the sounding joy. No more let sins and sorrows grow, nor thorns infest the ground. He comes to make his blessings flow, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found, far as the curse is found. He rules the world with truth and grace, and makes the nations prove the glories of his righteousness, and wonders of his love, and wonders of his love, and wonders, wonders of his love. Isn't that a beautiful song? It's a picture of the day when Christ comes back, and what he actually does, and what he sets up, and a removal of the curse, and a start of time for us to be blessed again. And a start of us to really teach the world. A wonderful thing. And a wonderful thing in truth. So every time you see something that happens where the zeitgeist seems to be against you, the zeitgeist being the spirit of the world, just remember, it's all in God's hands. You just have to stand up for the truth.